Hi, and welcome to Above and Beyond Minis. I'm Craig, and today we're diving straight into painting this Ultramarine Infernus Marine to a display standard. This isn't about stopping at battle ready. We're aiming higher right from the start. Whether you're here to refine your techniques or pushing your painting to the next level, this video is packed with tips to help you create stunning minis. So grab your brushes and let's take your painting above and beyond. So first I wanted to talk about the equipment I used for the video. Now, I'm not going to run through every single paint here that I used, and instead I'll make sure I list them down in the description of the video and also pop them up on the screen as and when I use those paints. For this particular video, I'd like to emphasize that I try to use quite a minimum color palette and equipment palette, as it were, for this video, just to sort of show you that even with a dozen paints, rather than the dozens, maybe hundreds that we probably have, that we can still get really good results. So I'm using a lot of paints that you'll find in like starter sets or the Combat Patrol magazine, that sort of thing, and show you how you can sort of use them in quite a few places to pretty good effect. But in the future, if you would like to see me use my wider array of paints, pigments and everything else, let me know and I'll expand my palette out somewhat. So when it comes to prepping the Mini, you want to get yourself a fairly good set of sprue cutters. I think these are the Citadel ones I got with Combat Patrol magazine. And you want to snip things off as close to the actual model as possible, so you're left with minimal sprue still left on your actual piece there. You'll then want to get a good hobby knife and cut in from both sides, trying to keep your knife level to whatever you're trying to clean up. So for example there, the barrel. When it comes to sanding and smoothing mold lines, I like to use these sanding sponges from God Hand. I mainly focus on the 400 and 600 grit ones. They usually leave a smooth enough finish for myself, and I really like how they can conform. You can see me sort of bending that round the power pack of the Marine there, and I think that's super useful. But yeah, effectively you go up from like 400 to 600, so you get finer as you sand, and you can see me wet my finger there just so you can see how smooth that finish is. And once that's primed and painted, it's going to be super smooth. I will quickly note I like to cut off the little things that go in the sockets of these push fit minis. I find they fit better. When it comes to gluing your Mini, I find that placing the glue along these very smooth, flat edges of each piece that effectively are the things that contact one another to be the best place to put your glue. As you can see, even when we're push fitting here, whilst that's great for newcomers and everything, they don't have to worry about anything, it does leave pretty egregious gaps. So I use sprue glue, which is just some tomato extra thin and a sprue, funnily enough, chucked in there, which sort of melts down, and you're going to have plenty of sprue lying around, I'm sure. Just effectively take that glue and put it on those flat pieces that connect one to another. And that will then melt the two bits of plastic together and just create a really good bond. And then if we're lucky, we'll get a little bit of squish out. And then we can use some just like straight extra thin to feather out that glue that's sort of pushed out from there. And that will allow us to turn it even more liquidy until you've got a really smooth finish again. When it comes to sockets, I just love to stick a load of glue in there. Again, that has been shortened, but it still allows me to sort of guide that in and get a really good finish there, because it will, again, melt everything up and stick all together. Notice that the palm of the Marine there connects with his fingers that's up on the flamer. What I like to do is then just grab some straight up liquid cement and just apply it there, hold it together, and you're done. And that's a finished, prepped Mini. We want the base to be a little bit more exciting than just some texture paste on a circular bit of plastic, as it were. And some way we can do this is quite literally elevating your Mini. And so I like to use this sheet of cork, a couple of mil probably by the look of things, and just roughly tear it off and get it into place and make sure that my Mini can actually still stand on it and it's not overhanging too much, that sort of thing. I'll then glue the cork to the base and make sure that the glue goes right up to the edges so it doesn't overhang. And then just cut some bits off just to make it look a bit uneven, a bit more natural. And then I go in with my texture paste and smear that everywhere, and that's including the little bit of plastic we've left below. So when it comes to actually sticking bits onto the base, I'll make a bit of room on the paste just to make it look like it's actually in the scene rather than just been plonked on top. So with the skull there, also with this paper clip into those bark chunks, I think those are from Army Painter, that I'll just chuck inside and glue inside a bit of that bark to look like a bit of concrete, or I think they call it permacrete, I think it is in Warhammer, and make it a bit skew-if so it looks like it's been blown apart rather than just this perfect little bit of, concrete with rebar, and stick it on. Also consider a little bit of texture paint just to sort of integrate it with the scene once again. And to stick the Marine on, I like to push him in the still wet texture paint just a little bit, just to get a bit of sort of a boot print in the mud or whatever it's going to be. So again, it looks like it's actually part of the scene rather than just, again, plonked on top. Base coating. I'm not going to show you me priming the Mini. I use a rattle can. I would use an airbrush if I had one, I guess, but Citadel Chaos Black rattle can does good enough for me. And what I like to do if I'm doing a standard sort of zenithal lighting scheme for a Mini, so overhead, midday sun or suns or whatever it might be on that particular planet they're on, take a photo with a lamp or a light overhead and smash up the contrast, not too much. And you can see on this picture right now that I'm circling, we've got loads of really, really white bits. And that's where we can kind of go, oh yeah, that's how the light's interacting with the shape. I'll use that. But I'm circling red where we really want the viewer's eyes to go. So to that end, we can use a bit of artistic license to make sure that that is highlighted more. If you plan on base coating a army or combat patrol with primarily one colour, I definitely suggest a rattle can, for example from Colourforge, and you can get your priming and base coating done all in one go. So when it comes to base coating, you can see I've added a little bit of water, but not loads to this Cantor blue. I personally like painting from really dark colours to really then light, so we get that contrast of value there. I can by all means talk about that at length in another video. Now, one thing that I wanted to note here, which caught me out, I guess, a little bit a few years ago when I first started painting, is that it's drilled into us that we really need to thin our paints. But what I used to do now and then was over-thin my paint. And so you're worried about obscuring the detail, but then you make it so thin, all that pigment runs in and obscures the detail. So just something to remember. Like, I thin mine down a little bit. You saw how much I thinned that Cantor down. Obviously your mileage may vary based upon the conditions in which you're painting. So there he is, all done. But again, bear in mind, a rattle can would save you a lot of time. Right, when it comes to metallics, I'm going in with some lead belcher for this guy, but because I'm going for the darkest tone first, I'm popping in some Abaddon Black to it. You can see about how many brushfuls I did there, but you can play around with it. But you can see there on my finger, we've got a really dark lead belcher and the standard lead belcher out of the pot. And we do the same here with the Retributor armour with Doombolt Brown, so it's a nice, rich, warm sort of tone going in there. And we're still sort of like a brassy, coppery colour, I guess, but it's still metallic and it will still work in the shadows of the miniature there. And so we just paint on all of these base coats still. Remember to make the Mini work around you rather than vice versa, so you can get to those hard to reach areas. A little bit of Rhinox hide for the leather pouches and base coats. And also some Xandru dust for the skull there. I did also notice at this point in time that there's a little bit of a gap between the sort of sculpted rock part of the base and our one, so I just stuck a bit more of that texture paint in there. Moving on, then we did the rock in Dawnstone and a little bit of lead belcher for the rebar poking out. Also going back in with some sandry dust for the purity seals, and then for the wax, a bit of corn red. Now, some people might look on in horror as I slap Null oil all over this guy, but I'm used to oil paints, oil washes, to really get shading into the recesses and into those nooks and crannies of the Mini. So this isn't too dissimilar, though I definitely recommend oils, and I can by all means do a video on that. So you can see here, usually I use like panel liners, and there you go, the aforementioned oils there. But you can see here, once all of that Null oil, Agrax shade, everything else that just popped up has dried. Look at that definition. Easy recess shading, no black lining needed, nothing like that. All we need to do now is not paint over the darkest part of the Mini. Okay, so you've heard of wet blending, you've heard of layering. I like to do something in the middle, I guess. So I'll pre-mix the paints I'll need on my wet palette, and we definitely need a wet palette. I can by all means make a video showing you how to make one at home. If you'd like, let me know. But effectively, we're going to get every different shade that we're going to need, from that really deep dark Cantor blue up through the McCrag up to the Baharoth blue. Making sure that we're not going over that Nuln oil affected Cantor blue, so it's sort of like the Cantor -1, as it were. But you can see what I'm doing here is effectively just adding a bit of paint on, going back to, okay, voiding my brush, i.e. eating it, then grabbing just a little bit higher up on the palette in regards to the value, so darker to lighter, and just overlapping the two, smooshing them together, and then I'll just keep going up and up and up and up and up. In 2 coats of that, and it dries very quickly because it's been thinned down just a little, not loads. But you can see there, I think real time, as I was recording it took me 5 minutes to get that result. Another thing you can do to help you pre-plan where your light is going to be, and also make your life a little bit easier when you're doing intermediate blending, is to sketch. So this is the top Baharoth blue on there, sort of sketched out where I think they're going to be. It changed quite a bit, to be fair, but it is quite an iterative process painting, because things change. You kind of think, no, that's too light, now that's too dark, or I want attention to be brought here, not there. Again, when it comes to those sort of decisions, let me know if you want a video of that. I could talk for a long time on that. But what I've done here is effectively sketched out Baharoth blue, and then I've sort of radiated out from that to be Baharoth and McCrag 50-50, and then outwards from there, just the McCrag. And you just keep stepping down half steps, and you can get a rough blend between the two. And then if you want to then intermediate blend on top of that, you're golden. But here's me going in there again now over a sketched part of his power pack that had a really rough sketch onto it, and I grab those paints and it's nice and smooth. I'm not a massive fan of edge highlighting. I'll do it as and when I feel I need to. Like on here, the contrast between sort of the knee pad there and the shin plate begs for a bit of a highlight there, but you'll see what I do at the end when it comes to that. One thing you should do from time to time is just, in not perfect lighting, put your Mini at arm's reach and see if you can still see the contrast there. I can see the spherical nature of his knee pad there, his helmet's really bright, and that's really useful at times, just to make sure you're on the right track. Right, eye lenses. I've got quite an easy technique for lenses that still look great, but my number one tip first and foremost for lenses and eyes, get yourself a nice pointy, fine tipped brush. Otherwise you're gonna have a horrible time. Even if you just use it just for this, just like detail work is so important. But anyway, go in there with black, so Abaddon black for this. I've then gone in with Dawnstone, about 2/3 of the way up. I then went up with Dawnstone again, but maybe only halfway up. I've then jumped in with some Corax White now, and then a second little punch of it, like an 1/8 up. So effectively you get this gradient, right, going from really white to slightly off-white to grey, all the way down to black. and then just lob in some of this Bile Red contrast paint. I love this stuff. I didn't realise how punchy it really was, but just lob that over and the contrast paint will do all the work for you, because it will just use all of that, the values underneath, and a little white dot in the corner of the lens there. You're golden. It's really good. Apologies for my poor camera work here. It was my first time doing this sort of stuff, and you just get stuck in painting and you look up at the footage and you go, oh yeah, brilliant, it's all out of focus. But what I'm doing here is basically stippling on Retributor armour, so straight out of the pot Retributor, not that darker mix we had earlier. And I'll then slowly step it up and stipple more and more on with a lead belcher mixed in there, so the highest highlights there look more of a silver, but still gold nonetheless. And you can see the sort of his right pauldron compared to his left there, and the effect is pretty awesome. The key here is to wipe the majority of the paint off on a piece of kitchen roll. You want to make sure you get a good chunk of the paint off. You can see I'm like really getting it off. So the lead belcher there, for example, you get quite a bit of it off. It's not a dry brush, but it's not a wet brush. You want to get that texture in there. You want to get that sort of beaten look. Oh, and don't use a good brush for this. It will get ruined. So, the base. When it comes to dry brushing here, usually I like a nice round dry brush, but I find if you're not doing sub-assemblies, a thinner one can be a bit more effective. So I've just gone Rhinox hide into Xandri dust there, just to lighten things up. Brush it all off on your kitchen roll and test it on the back of your hand or a texture palette. And yeah, you just basically keep going in there, adding slightly more and more Xandri dust until you're happy. I found that it was a bit over highlighted, so I just knocked things back and got that contrast back in there with some Agrax Earthshade. And the same goes with this skull here. So I had the initial Xandri dust and then just kept adding in some Wraithbone into that. And again, use your reference image you had earlier. You could see that the eye sockets, the orbitals of the skull was really pronounced, so highlight that. And same with the rock there. Feeling inspired from the lens work with the Bile Red, I thought, oh, maybe I could do the same for the wax. So I darkened the center part of the wax down with a bit of Rhinox hide mixed in with that corn red, and then lightened up the sort of the edges of the seal where the light would hit it with a little bit of Wraithbone mixed in with the corn red, and then just stuck some more Bile Red on it, and it worked. An absolute treat. And same with like this little buttons, lights, I don't know what they are, at the back of this marine. Pop some white on, Corax white, and then contrast paint over, jobs are good. The actual parchment of the seals, very much the same as the skull, so Xandri up through Wraithbone, and then a bit of black for the text on there. Then for the leather, it was Rhinox hide up into Xandri dust, really focusing on the texture there as well, just tip taps and scratches and whatever else. And then with a nice coat of Storm Shield, because I like the matte look, he is in a really good spot, and you could definitely be happy with that and take him and pop him on your shelf or to take to games, and it will really shine and stand out just with the sheer amount of contrast we've got in there. But there is still more that we can do. So for example, here we have some muzzle burn. So we just take these 4 paints stuck with the Seraphim Sepia and start about 3/4 of the way down the barrel and pull towards the end. We then do the same with the other shades, covering less and less each time, but make sure they dry between applications until you're left with that really rich gradient there. Right. Decals, and so these can really add a lot of character to your minis and can also really help convey weathering. So I soak the decal and also wet the area that I'm going to apply it with some AK decal adapter. Manipulate it a little bit to get it roughly into place. I found that I needed to use some decal softener just to get it to sit nice. And then cover it in varnish. Really varnish it in there and it'll look good. Weathering. Okay, so this is something that, again, not all people want to do. They want to keep their miniatures looking a bit more cleaner, and I totally appreciate that. But to add a bit more visual interest, let's jump in with a bit of sponge and a bit of Cantor Blue. Just dot it around. Same for edge highlighting. Said I didn't like to do it too much. I'd lose my mind if I did. So yeah, just going in here with, I think it's Baharoth with a bit of Macragge, so it's almost like a Calgar blue, and just tippy tap that around just to make some scratches, bit of texture, that sort of thing all over those areas. I then like to do the same mix there, and then just put some little scratches, especially in the dark areas with the light colour and light area with the dark colour, as you can see there, because you get some really nice contrast, and it sort of brings across the sort of dent in a dark area might catch the light, and same with a gouge in a light area might have the darkness. Then a bit of Rhinox hide in there just to sort of stipple on some mud and grime and whatnot. And there you have it, a display ready Ultramarine in Furnace Marine. I really hope that you found this tutorial helpful, picked up some tips for your own painting. If you enjoyed the video, never said this before, I've heard it plenty, please don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to Above and Beyond Minis for more tutorials like this in the future. I'd love to hear some feedback from you all. What would you like to see in future videos? I don't know whether I should be doing deep dives in particular topics, just like blending, base coats, whatever it might be, or maybe have longer form content, like doing a mini like this from start to finish, but maybe a 30 or 40 minute video, so you can just sort of chill out with me and we can paint some minis together, and you might be able to pick up some things along the way. Please let me know. But drop a comment here, reach out to me on Instagram at Above and Beyond Minis. I'm always excited to connect with fellow painters, so please feel free to reach out. But with that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.